Brachos, a little more of a hakdama. We originally said we'll do Ikar V'Tafel, but we sort of got sidetracked into Shinui Makom yesterday. So let's continue a little bit about Shinui Makom. Shinui Makom. Now the question is, what does Shinui Makom mean? And when is there a concept of Shinui Makom? When is there not a concept of Shinui Makom? So the problem it's not a problem with the halacha, but the problem with the halacha of Shinui Makom is there are a lot of exceptions. So after you learn all the rules, then you have to realize that, I don't want to say every case, but many cases are exceptions. So we'll try to take it in order. This is Simin Kuf Ayin Ches, really Sef Aleph and Beis. And for all the Sephardim amongst us, we're talking today in the world of the Ramah. And the world of the Ramah is a massive world over here. So much so that after Sif Beis comes along, the Ramah comments on Sif Beis, and he says, "V'yesh cholkim b'chol ma shekosav b'simin zeh." And he throws the whole thing out. Rak sh'soivim sheshini makom inay el k'hesach hadas. And then he continues, and he brings down all the halachas. So as a disclaimer, we're talking in the world of the Ramah. World of the Ramah. Now, the Ramah just taught us that what is Shinui Makom? Shinui Makom is Hesach Hadas. So that simply means, in a very simple form, that you make a bracha. Yesterday we said how we never have Hesach Hadas. Yesterday we spoke that when you're in your house, when you're in your workplace, when you're in your Beis Medrash, everything in that room is in your das. Even without proactively thinking it's in your das, is it in your das? I would be remiss if I don't mention the pashtus is there still is a lechatchila to actually have das. We're just talking about what happens when you didn't have das. The stama in your house, that everything is included in das. But the pashtus probably is that there is a lechatchila to have das. And this really is a very global sugya in all of halacha. How do we look at stam das? I think we've spoken in the past about Hilchos Chazara and Shabbos. I think we've spoken that one of the conditions is to have das, to return the crackpot. And we've said many times that when you're taking off your chal on Friday night, you're having das to put it back on because that's just what you're doing. But yet over there, I believe it's Rabbi Kiva Eger that says you still should have proactive das. And there are kama v'kama shaylas that come out of that. So as a disclaimer, you always should have proactive das. But fine. So now, what is hesach hadas? Hesach hadas is a lack of das. What that means is, there are times that even if you thought you have das, you have no das. Let's give a very extreme case. We said yesterday, you're at home and everything in your house is your das. So we're now about to talk about Shinui Makom, you're going outside and this and that. But let's say a very extreme case, Atzala member gets Atzala call. He gets Atzala call, he leaves his house. That, al pi pashtus, is the quintessential hesech hadas. Why is it a hesech hadas? Because done, it just cut up his suda. His suda, whatever he did, just ended. Now that probably will break all the rules. We're about to see there's a chilik between mizaynais hamoitzi versus shahakol eitzan adam. Shahakol eitzan adam is a massive chilik between those two. But there are times that you could have a hesech hadas in everything. This calls into question when it comes to Kiddush. Yayin is very similar to Amoitzi and Agafen. So let's not get confusing. So let's make that split. That split is when you make a shahakol or a ha'etz or hadama, it's a fundamentally different bracha than making a hamoitzi or a mizaynis. What is the fundamental difference? If I were to ask you, what's the fundamental difference? So your first part of your brain would say, hamoitzi and mizaynis are things which satiate you. Okay, that's within the bracha itself. But within the obligation of the bracha, there's a fundamental difference. The difference is, when you make a mizaynis and hamoitzi, it's a bracha, te'unin bracha b'mikaiman. You really have to come back. If I'm in the middle of a suda here and I go back inside, I got to come back here to bench. Now, whether I'll be allowed to bench elsewhere is a separate shayla, so don't get confused over here. But it's a bracha that requires me to come back over here. Sarich bracha bim mekayman. Whereas a shahak leitz adam, there's no such thing as bracha sarich bim mekayman. We'll call it a flaky bracha. The bracha is where it is, and when I leave, I lost my bracha. So now Now, this is, in some people's brains, this is counterintuitive, my brain included. So I'm going to try to explain it so we don't get confused. So when I'm making a hamaitzi, when I walk outside, what happens? Nothing. Why? I just walked outside. I walked down the block. I got into my car. Can I come back here and eat hamaitzi? The answer is yes. Because it's a bracha, hatunin bracha bim mikayim, and I really have to come back here to bed. So because of that, I'm always bound back to my table. And therefore, what happens when I walk outside? Nothing. I still have my bracha alive and well. Therefore, theoretically, I'm going to say theoretically, because whether you're supposed to do this l'chatchila, b'di'evid, have das, not have das, can I continue my hamaitzi outside? Yes. Can I eat at home and go to shalosh shudas in shul and continue eating? Yes. Now, these things are in l'chatchila. Maybe you only should do it for a mitzvah. Maybe you should only do it if you have das originally. V'chulu. But in the world of, do I lose my bracha? Says the Ramah, no. However, when I have a shakal eitz adama, I have a drink over here. When I go outside, when I go down the block, it's over. That shahakal has died. It's called hesech hadas. Because I don't have to come back here to make my bracha achrayna, halachically, I was mesiach das for my bracha. I lost my das. Now, you might say, what do you mean? You're thinking about it the whole time. Doesn't make a difference. Doesn't make a difference. Lehalacha, you lost your bracha. And therefore, when I'm inside, I have a shackle, I go outside. And when I say outside, let's just use street. Rosh Hashanah. I want to use extreme examples because in all scenarios, it's not really true. In your house, you have your front stoop. Maybe it's part of your house. Over here, you have a chutzner in the front. Maybe that's part of the house. In your backyard, maybe it's part of your house. It gets very complicated in what's actually chutz, bayis lechutz, bayis lebayis. But the quintessential bayis lebayis means two different batim, two different reshuyos. I go to Rosh Hashanah. I lost my bracha. What does it mean I lost my bracha? That means if I want to drink again, I need to make a new bracha rishayna. And das, pashtus, will not help that. I can't have das on a shahakol to have a shahakol elsewhere. You can't do that. Now, we'll end with one very big exception. One very big exception, which every single, if I'm not really quoting names and faces because everything here is debatable, this is going to be more begeder akdama, then I would like to try to maybe go through a little bit more keseder. But the one time that your shahakol could continue with you is when it's a shahakol on the go. Now, whether this actually exists or not is actually a debate. There are paiskim that say there's no such thing as about what I'm about to say. And whether there is a raya from Holchei Drachim, which says that, what do you mean? Your bracha goes with you, is a different discussion. But if I have my cup of coffee, and I take my cup of coffee, and I make the bracha on the go. Let's just use an extreme example. Because Ramesha says, what do you mean? If you sat down with your cup of coffee, that's called a kviyas. And then you stood up to take it on the go, you're messed up right now. Because your coffee was here. The moment you walk out your front door, you lost your coffee. You lost your coffee. You make a bracha, yeah. No, I'm sorry. You sat down with your coffee, you made a shackle, you drank your coffee, your kiveya, that means your bracha's here. You walk outside, that's called bayis lebayis, you lost your bracha. But let's say I made my bracha on the go. I took my cup of coffee, and I went outside, and I made a shackle, and I'm walking in the street, drinking my cup of coffee, al pi pashtas, you're not possible edus, drinks you're allowed to drink outside. Whether some place can disagree with that, let's leave that for now. But lamaisa pashtas drinks, definitely here in America, maybe in Eretz Yisrael, some will time it differently. But the pashtas is drinks are things that you're allowed to take with you, and therefore the bracha will go with you. I just told you that your bracha is a hesach hadas, because there that's called I'm having a positive das to continue my bracha with me. So rule number one is, even though you can't do that to have das, now theoretically you could, that's what I'm saying, that's the funny thing. If I had my cup of coffee, and I never was kaveya myself, meaning I made my coffee at my counter, it's very difficult what's called the kaviyas.
What do you mean? Let's say I kaveya myself, but I have das.
So
you just said it doesn't work.
That's why I want to keep things extreme. Meaning the pashtus is bayis labayis is you're out. Now I'm giving you the opposite extreme. Is that if I make something that's not called bayis, that this bracha has no makom at all, I'm removing it. Now whether bayis labayis, if I had proactive das in the beginning, maybe that could help me. It's a different story. But the pashtus is, I'm just giving you the two very extreme cases, and then we're going to have to settle back in the middle. So, la halacha, what comes out from this very simple hakdama is, and by the way, yesterday we mentioned Rav Yaakov Emden, it's in Maruk Siyah Simin Kofayin Ches, in which he says that when I go outside and come back inside, he says if you're chayzer miyad, you don't lose it. So now that's the halacha for the day, and that's the exception for the day. If I have a shahakal inside, I walk out to the street. When I walk to the street, I go to get my mail. I come back inside, I'm drinking the exact same cup of coffee. What's the halacha? Lefi the Mishnah Berurah, you make a new shahakal. Why? The moment you walked outside, it was called hesach hadas, your bracha was cut in half. Now you need to make a new bracha. Let's say it was a mizaynis. Let's say I'm having a cookie, and then I go get my meal and I come back inside. I have no problem. Because mizaynis is a bracha that you were supposed to come back to. Now, what if I have my cookie with my coffee? So now, can I say just realize what just happened. My cookie, the bracha continues. My coffee, my bracha doesn't continue. Because maybe if the whole lumdis of the cookie is that it's Sricham Bracha Mimkaiman, that I have to come back. So now I have a reason I have to come back because of my cookie. So could my drink piggyback on my coffee? This is a machlekes achrayim, it's a machlekes hapaiskim, and there are those who say that you could be meko. But what we will end off with is, we mentioned yesterday, that's the Mishnah Berurah Shita. Rav Yaakov Emden says that if you're chayzer miyad, by the way, the Mishnah Berurah Mamish talks about miyad. He says you went to talk to your friend for a minute and you come right back inside. But let's say the leader of Yaakov Emden, he says if you're coming right away, it's not called a shini makom. It's not called a shini makom. So you go right back outside, you come back inside, you're fine. So that's even for shahakos. That's even for shahakos. Certainly on your cookie and your milk. And we'll end with this. So again, shahakol ha'etz and hadama. The moment you step outside, room to room is fine. B'di'evet. Again, I'm trying to give it very extreme over here so that we could somehow actually put this in our brains. But again, shahakol ha'etz and hadama. You go outside, you lost your bracha. Mezainis ha'maitzi, you go outside, you did not lose your bracha. You go outside for a moment. Mishnah Berurah says you lost your bracha. Yaakov Emden says you did not lose your bracha. Room to room, you're supposed to have das even for shakalates and adama, but b'di'evet it's fine. But we mentioned yesterday that's not really so negaya for us, because when we're going room to room within our own houses, that's all going to be considered basically das, and therefore that will be fine.